How's it going, dudes? Monopoly Fortnite. That's right, Fortnite Monopoly. It's here, it's real, and oh boy, it's nothing like you're expecting. So it's not a Fortnite-based Monopoly game. No, believe it or not. Connect 4. Out of every Monopoly game I've covered, this is by far one of the strangest, and as we've covered, that is a high bar to clear, earning that distinction partially due to it being the only one that I've seen that allows you to just up and shoot your friend right in their big dumb face. When you hear the phrase Fortnite Monopoly, you would expect this to be one of the worst things ever put to print. If there was any game for Hasbro to phone in on and just collect their check, it would most certainly be this one. But surprisingly, Hasbro instead poured an immense amount of effort into Monopoly Fortnite, shaking up the Monopoly formula to create a gaming experience that is nothing like anything they've put out before. But as we've also seen, just because Hasbro tries on something doesn't mean they won't screw it up. So we'll be dropping into this wonky world and combing through everything that it has to offer to answer one very important question. Is Fortnite Monopoly good? So let's start off this epic adventure by first getting to know the game a little better. Fortnite Monopoly was originally released in 2018 and has seen a number of different versions, including a second edition with updated skins and a collector's edition with a whole host of changes. I'll be mainly focusing on the collector's edition since it has some more interesting parts, but I have played both, so when there is a massive difference between collector's and standard, I'll bring it up. How Fortnite Monopoly works is players move around the board trying to collect properties and loot to strengthen their character. Players will try to attack each other while building walls to defend themselves, at the same time attempting to avoid the ever-growing storm. The last player with HP remaining will claim the epic Victory Royale. Now, obviously, if you've never played the game before, what I just said will make absolutely no sense, and I don't blame you, this game is extremely complicated. So in order for you to get the whole picture for how this game works, I'm going to work through the mechanics from least to most complicated, while also addressing how well they transitioned that mechanic over from the video game. First up, in Fortnite, the storm is an ever-growing purple wall that will damage players over time if they are inside it. As the game goes on, the storm will cover more and more of the map, pushing players closer together, which will eventually force them to fight each other or face losing in the storm. The storm in Fortnite Monopoly is represented by the purple storm cards. How these work is that every time someone passes go, a storm card will be drawn from the deck, and it will randomly choose one space on the board to be taken by the storm. Whenever you land on a space that has been stormed, you will take a varying amount of damage, so as the game goes on, the amount of spaces that you can safely land on is going to get smaller and smaller. On top of that, the storm can not only take players' properties, but also other spaces that will screw with the game's mechanics. For instance, if the storm takes the go to jail space, players will no longer go to jail if they land there, and if the storm takes go, you will no longer collect 2 health when you pass, removing the main way that you can recover from damage. The storm cards are an excellent implementation. I'm really impressed with how well they managed to transfer the feeling of a map getting smaller as the game goes on. And since the cards either have players pick spaces to be stormed or pick them at random, each game is going to have a completely different storm circle, just like in the video game. Absolutely stellar work that makes me really mad that Hasbro can do this pretty much perfectly and yet still screw up way easier mechanics in their other Monopoly titles. Great work, no notes. Up next, it's time for... It's not a Monopoly game without some hot real estate action. So how many V-Bucks will it cost you to get in on the lucrative Fortnite housing market? Well, remember how in Monopoly Cheaters Edition they changed up the pricing structure on some of the properties? The most extreme example being that Pennsylvania Avenue was just free? Well, they thought that that was just a splendid idea. In fact, the market is feeling very generous today, as every single property in the game is completely free. Duh! My shifty stocks! Yes, whenever you land on an unowned property, you claim it free of charge, and when other players land on it from then on, they will take damage. On top of that, if you manage to own a full color set, you can heal 2 HP if you land on it. I know we haven't gotten to HP yet, but that's good. You want as much of that as you can get. As you can imagine, all of the properties are based off of Fortnite locations, but since the map is constantly changing, the properties vary wildly between the Standard and Collector's Edition. For instance, the Collector's Edition was released in 2021, so it being relatively new, I only really know Tilted Towers and the Durr Burger place, while the Standard Edition has more classic locales, like the Flush Factory, the Loot Lake, the horrible Dusty Depot replacement, all of your favorites. Seeing as the board is very Fortnite-centric, a lot of the classic Monopoly features had to be replaced in order to make room for the new stuff. Oh no! Fatalities include the railroads, shocker, the utilities, the taxes, and the chance and community chest spaces, replaced by these brand new specialty spaces. Spikes will hurt anyone that lands on them for 1 HP, while the cozy campfire will heal anyone that lands on them for 1 HP. The choppa and the motorboat spaces will allow you to advance to the next unclaimed location on the board and claim it, although if you pass go, you don't get 2 health. These 2 spaces are exclusive to the Collector's Edition, as the Standard Edition's board has a reduced amount of spaces similar to Cheater's Edition. And finally, this rendition's railroad replacement is the Loot Chest, which allows you to take 1 random piece of loot from the pile, which is really good, as I'll get into. The properties are all from Fortnite, so it does give the impression that you are running around the map. But this is where the disconnect from actual Monopoly is the strongest. There is nothing that makes it feel like you actually own these properties. You can't build on them, you can't trade them, heck, you can't even buy them. It really just feels like you're watching over them like some kind of security guard. There was a massive missed opportunity for building on these too. You know, building, the one thing that these franchises have in common. So much risk reward could have been put in here. You could have players build on their properties to increase the damage their properties deal to others by requiring them to skip a turn for every improvement they make. And they'll need to weigh the risk of that because they could be attacked while doing it, and the storm could take that property at any time. As it works now, it's fine and functional, but if they gave the properties the same treatment that they gave the storm, we would have something really special on our hands here. Open that chest up, buddy. It's time for the... When you land on one of the loot spaces, you get the opportunity to draw a loot card. There is no limit to the amount of loot you can have on you, so you should try to get as much as possible, as you could end up taking the loot that other players might need. The loot comes in 3 different rarities that you can draw at random. Gambling, so let's check out each one and see what you can hope to get from a chest. The rare loot. Rare item. When you attack another player, they lose 2 health instead of 1. Rare item 2. Lets you ignore line of sight, I'll get to that, and attack any player. Medkit. One-time use allows you to restore 5 health. Stink Bomb. When you attack, all players in your line of sight lose 3 health. Clinger. One-time use, choose any space on the board, and all players currently there lose 4 health. And the Bouncer. One-time use, move any player up to 4 spaces forward or backward. The Epic Loot has only one thing, the Epic Item. When you attack another player, they lose 3 health instead of 1. And the Legendary Loot. Legendary item. When you attack another player, they lose 4 health instead of 1. The Bush, which makes you immune to all boogie bombs. And the most legendary item of all, the Chug Jug. One-time use, the Chug Jug will heal your character all the way back to full health. This card just reminded me that there is no Tomato Town in the Collector's Edition, and now I am sad. The loot is nice and carries a ton of different effects that will change up how you choose to play the game, but they're certainly not perfect. Calling what are obviously weapons items is a real missed opportunity, especially since you could put in specific weapons from the game to reflect their effects, like making Rare Item 2 a bolt-action sniper since it can go after faraway targets. In addition, using the weapons could allow you to make more cards with different effects, like a pump shotgun that does more damage but has less range, which could even further change up people's playstyles between games. All in all, some missed potential here, but definitely still a very solid lineup. Alright, I dumped a bunch of terminology there that might not make a lot of sense right now, so let's go ahead and get into the most complicated part of the game to clear up the remaining clouds. It's time for... As with any standard Monopoly game, this one uses 2 dice, but movement and what you can do on your turn are very different in Monopoly Fortnite. Only 1 die is for movement, as the other die is the action die, featuring symbols that give you permission to do certain actions on your turn, and here's where things get complicated. We're gonna go over what each face of the action die does, so strap in and lock on. Heal. When you roll this, you can heal 2 health. How health works is that every player starts off with 15 health points, and can never go above that no matter how much they heal. Once a player drops to 0 health points by any means, they are out of the game, and 2 things happen. First, any loot that they had on them is dropped onto the spot that they died on, and the next player to either land on or pass that space collects all of that sweet, juicy loot for themselves. Second, any location cards that player had are immediately taken by the storm, so if you take out a real estate mogul, prepare for the board to get much, much smaller. Crosshairs. Finally, I get to shoot my friends. How combat works in this game is when you roll a crosshairs, you can attack 1 player in your line of sight and make them lose 1 health. A player is in your line of sight if they are on the same lane as you, so imagine it as what your character would see if the middle of the board was walled off. This does mean that if you are on a corner space, you can see down 2 lanes, so keep that in mind. Another part of the dice that you should know is that you can choose which order you take each die in. So for instance, if you roll a 6 in a crosshairs, you can either move onto a new lane, then attack a player in your new line of sight, or attack a player in your current line, then move to try to widen the gap on them. Along with that, be sure to remember any effects that your loot has, since they might let you do more damage or hit multiple targets. Choose which loot you decide to use wisely though, as when you attack, you can only use 1 at a time. Combat is great and all, but what is Fortnite without some classic building? My playstyle. Building in Fortnite Monopoly works like this. When you roll a brick, you move first, then you can place one of these walls down on any of the spaces you passed on that turn. Walls will remain on the board until either a player runs into them, in which case they stop moving even if they had spaces left, or if they are attacked by a crosshairs. This adds even more depth to the gameplay, as let's say you're in this situation and you roll a 4 into crosshairs. Do you move first to take out the wall and take damage so you can attack your opponent? Or do you attack the wall so you can move the full amount and get some loot? Monopoly Fortnite. The thinking man's game. Finally, the last action you can take, the Boogie Bomb. The Boogie Bomb is relatively simple. Whenever someone rolls it, all other players take 1 damage and all walls on the board are destroyed. I'm not a big fan of the Boogie Bomb. Because of it, walls don't tend to stay up for very long at all, making them much less useful than they seem. On top of that, dealing 1 damage to all players doesn't really feel like the Boogie Bomb. What would make it a lot more accurate is if you could target 1 player and while they can still move, they are unable to use the action die on their next turn, cause, you know, they're boogieing. But other than the Boogie Bomb, the movement, combat, and building mechanics are all implemented really well and reflect how quickly the advantage can change in the game depending on what goes down. And while the attacking being locked behind luck can get annoying, I think they balanced it pretty well. It still has to resemble Monopoly after all. Before I give the final answer, I want to highlight the game's components, as this is where the biggest difference between the standard and collector's editions come into play. The boxes the games come in vary wildly. The standard version comes in your basic board game box, and does a good job telling you what game you're getting into. That's right, Risk. Meanwhile, the collector's edition comes in a smaller square box that resembles one of those supply drops, and includes 2 smaller boxes on the inside that can hold the components. The pieces are completely different. The collector's pieces are much higher quality, being metal figures of several of the game's characters doing emotes, who I will now try to name off without looking. Jonesy, that one's easy. She looks like a Clara? Panda, cause the hat. I think I saw a costume for this one in Walmart. Pink Commando? Spikes, cause the spikes. I know that's wrong, but I'm giving myself a point here anyway, because I know that's Gangnam Style. He looks like an Akimbo or something goofy like that. Peely, everyone knows Peely. This guy's wearing a tie, so I'm thinking Midas. And Meowskulls, you know, the Peter Griffin thing. These are all really high quality and way better than the pictures that you just put on the stand like in the standard version. But where the standard version wins here is in variety, as it contains portraits of 27 different skins for you to choose from, and has even more new ones in the second edition. So a classic quality or quantity conundrum, up to you which you prefer. The action die is a little different between the two. In the collector's edition, the die has the icons built into it, while the standard version has you put stickers on it, which gives you a bit of creative leeway. The health tokens are very different. In the collector's edition, they are these little plastic discs. Good quality, easy to grab onto, fine stuff here. In the standard version, they are these little chips that are tougher to grab a hold of, and you will need to punch out all 110 of them from the cardboard before you can start the game. This will either be really fun or really annoying. There is no middle ground here. But of course, I can't bring up the collector's edition without mentioning your grand prize, as by getting this version, you also can claim some unique in-game back bling for your character. I could just look it up and show it to you, but since I have access to it, I might as well claim it for myself and show it off. So let's re-download the game real quick and see what we got. Oh shoot. So now that we've covered every bit of the game, it is time to make the final decision. Is Fortnite Monopoly good? Your answer to mankind's most pressing question of the decade is... yes! Now, is this a good version of Monopoly? No. There is no railroads, utilities, taxes, money, chance cards, community chest cards, building houses, trading, or even just buying property. Remove the copyrighted artwork and this game has literally nothing to do with Monopoly at all. That's why I've been mostly calling it Fortnite Monopoly, because it is clear whose name should be first on the paper here. But regardless, it is a surprisingly competent title, featuring a ton of depth to its mechanics, gameplay that forces you to think on your toes, and a relatively short playtime that ensures that you'll be able to get multiple games in during a session. The randomness that's brought in by the dice, the loot, and especially the storm ensures that no two games are the same either, so who knows what it'll take to win each new game that you get into. Me, that's who. And I'm gonna give you the premium strategies that you'll need in order to bring home the bacon and secure the bag in Fortnite Monopoly. One mechanic that I've yet to mention is that unlike other Monopolies, players do not all start the game on go. Instead, one at a time, players will drop out of the battle bus and choose which space they'd like to start the game on. So let's look over the board and see which space is the best to go for. I'd say that if you're looking to give yourself the best chance at a good start, you should be dropping in the Weeping Woods. This gives you 4 spots on the die to stay in range of some loot, and if you miss it, you could hit the Choppa, which will likely get you one of the blue properties. If someone manages to damage you early, you can just pass go to get that health back, and you will be immediately in range of a campfire, motorboat, and more loot. On the opposite end, I'd avoid landing in any color that's right after loot, since you'll be out of range of getting some on your first turn, especially the yellows, since you could also end up in jail. As for the loot, what items should you be shooting for? Rare Item 2 is a great backup item to have, since if you roll crosshairs while no one is in your line of sight, you won't end up wasting that roll. The Stink Bomb can be a very powerful item, especially if you're on a corner, since it will hit everyone in your line of sight. If you do have it, try to get sent to jail, as that will guarantee that you can use it at max power if you roll crosshairs. The Chug Jug is a must grab, as when everyone is bleeding health in the late game, getting back to full health could be the boost you need to outlast the competition. The Clinger could end up being the most valuable item to have if you hold on to it, as when the game is getting down to the wire, being able to deal 4 damage to any player on the board could be the finisher you need to close out the game. Finally, if you want to play this gem, it's likely going to be a little tough to convince your friends to play something called Fortnite Monopoly. So how do you trick people into playing? Instead of saying, hey, let's play Fortnite Monopoly, it's really good, trust me, please. Try a, hey, look at this thing that I found. Want to try it out and see how bad it is? And if they play it and like it, they'll be pleasantly surprised. Congratulations, you did it! I think pleasantly surprised was the reaction from everyone who tried this game, as I doubt anyone looked at this and went, yep, that's gonna be a really good board game, especially considering Hasbro's track record with the series. But it is just that, a really good board game. Everything comes together to make a really compelling experience that's different on every play, making Fortnite Monopoly of all things one of the few actually good games that I have covered on this channel. Phenomenal. I would say today's lesson is don't judge a book by its cover, but that's what the covers are for. So I think we've all learned a different valuable lesson from our dear friend here today. If you want to make a good Monopoly, make a game that is nothing like Monopoly. Signing off for a Lost Chicken Dinner, I am KamSandwich. Thank you for watching and have a fantastic day. A special thank you to my suppliers, staff, and chefs over at the deli. If you'd like to join the crew, you can take a look using the link in the description below.